Britain's next recession is not coming. It is already here. While Westminster insists the economy is resilient, council bankruptcies are accelerating, housing markets are collapsing, and entire regional economies are running on fumes. The Bank of England warns there is a 40% chance the UK has already entered a technical recession. Unemployment has climbed to 4.8%, inflation stubbornly sits at 3.6%, and families are fleeing struggling regions by the thousands. The British dream has turned into a countdown clock. This is not a forecast. It is already happening. These are the 12 regions collapsing first as the UK slides into its most dangerous downturn in decades. The East Midlands, once the manufacturing heart of England, now hides an economy built on crumbling foundations. Beneath the quiet towns of Nottingham, Leicester, and Derby, economic cracks are widening fast. With GDP per head at just 85% of the UK average, this 4.9 million population region is falling further behind. Economic output contracted by 1% in 2023, making it one of England's worst-performing regions. Unemployment has crept to 4.5%, while median home prices of £250,000 remain out of reach for households earning the regional median of just £30,000. That means families would need to spend over 40% of take-home pay just to afford a basic mortgage. Manufacturing, once the region's backbone, has shed thousands of jobs. Consumer-facing sectors are collapsing. Wholesale and retail contracting by 3.3%. Accommodation and food services down 2.7%. Job vacancies are declining, signaling a weakening labour market with no recovery in sight. The region's cities face an acute crisis. Nottingham City Council issued a Section 114 bankruptcy notice in November 2023, citing a £23 million overspend driven by social care costs, rising homelessness, and inflation. Unlike other failing councils, Nottingham's collapse was not due to risky investments. It was simply inadequate funding meeting rising costs, a problem facing dozens of councils nationwide. Transportation infrastructure remains woefully inadequate, with limited connectivity hampering growth. The lack of a major metropolitan centre means the East Midlands struggles with weak agglomeration effects. As inflation erodes household budgets and the government contemplates further cuts, the East Midlands combination of manufacturing decline and council financial distress leaves it exposed to deeper troubles ahead. Yorkshire and the Humber, home to 5.5 million people, embodies the north-south divide that has defined British economics for generations. Despite major cities like Leeds, Sheffield, and Bradford, economic growth has stalled completely. GDP contracted by 1% in 2023, one of England's poorest performances. GDP per head stands at just 87% of the UK average, reflecting a productivity gap that has widened rather than narrowed. Average weekly real earnings have stagnated, barely higher than levels seen in the early 2000s. That means 2 decades. Millions of workers face zero wage growth. Bradford City Council has been identified as being in serious financial difficulties. There are warnings it could face bankruptcy. The city's challenges reflect broader regional pressures. Social care costs are soaring. Central government grants have been slashed 40% since 2010, and councils are unable to raise sufficient revenue through council tax. While median home prices hover around £200,000, unemployment at 4.3%, and wage stagnation mean many still struggle. Yorkshire recorded 3.9% house price inflation in 2025, but paired with 3.6% inflation, real purchasing power has barely budged. Consumer-facing sectors have been devastated. Retail, hospitality, and entertainment are contracting sharply, creating ripple effects throughout the local economy. The cancellation of the eastern leg of HS2 dealt another blow to connectivity hopes. With growth stalled, council finances strained, and household budgets squeezed, Yorkshire faces an uncertain future. The investment needed will not arrive in time. The North East, with 2.6 million people, has the lowest GDP per head of any English region at just £21,000, barely 66% of the UK average. Decades of post-industrial decline have never been addressed. The collapse of shipbuilding, coal mining, and manufacturing left scars that modern services have failed to heal. Unemployment remains elevated at 4.5%, with the lowest employment rate in England at approximately 72%. More concerning is job quality. The region has predominantly low-wage, low-skill employment with limited progression opportunities. Core spending power for local authorities remains well below 2010 levels in real terms, even as demand for services, particularly social care, continues rising. Several councils have warned of impending financial distress without additional support. Housing remains relatively affordable at median prices around £150,000. But this reflects weak demand and limited opportunity rather than a healthy market. The region saw 7.9% house price growth in 2025, but from such a low base, it has not translated into broader prosperity. The West Midlands represents Britain's most dramatic economic collapse. Birmingham City Council's bankruptcy in September 2023 sent shockwaves through the entire nation, exposing deeper problems affecting the whole region. With 6 million people, the West Midlands has struggled with automotive manufacturing decline. Birmingham faced an estimated £760 million equal pay liability, later revised to potentially £250 million, an accounting error so large it prompted calls for a public inquiry, plus an £87 million annual deficit. The consequences were devastating. 600 job cuts, community centres closed, waste collection reduced to every 3 weeks, streetlights dimmed, and council tax hiked by 21%, one of the largest increases ever seen. The government demanded £300 million in savings and £750 million in asset sales. Recent audited accounts suggest the initial equal pay estimate may have been inflated by 200%. Accounting academics argue that Birmingham was never bankrupt, raising disturbing questions about how such a crisis could be based on incorrect figures. Beyond Birmingham, unemployment has risen, manufacturing continues declining, and consumer-facing sectors have contracted sharply. Office vacancies in Birmingham increased to 18.8%. Commercial property values have fallen, and nearly 1,976 bank-owned properties at idle, the highest number in the UK. Housing affordability worsens daily. While prices remain around £250,000, they continue outpacing wage growth. Combined with elevated unemployment and economic uncertainty, many households struggle to access home ownership. The region's inequality is entrenched. Affluent suburbs remain prosperous, while other areas face concentrated poverty and limited opportunity. With Europe's largest local authority in financial crisis and manufacturing in terminal decline, the West Midlands faces an uncertain future. Birmingham's collapse may be just the first domino to fall. The Northwest, with 7.4 million people, contains stark inequality. While Manchester thrives as a media, finance, and technology hub, much of the wider region struggles. GDP per head stands at 89% of the UK average. The region ran a fiscal deficit of £49.9 billion in 2020 to 2021, the largest regional deficit in the UK, highlighting dependence on central government transfers. House prices in Manchester exceed £250,000, creating affordability challenges despite 4.8% annual growth. Consumer-facing sectors face sharp contractions, wholesale and retail down 3.3%, accommodation and food services down 2.7%. These industries employ a significant portion of the workforce, and their struggles have devastating ripple effects. Manufacturing continues a long-term decline. Former industrial towns across Lancashire and Cheshire have never recovered from deindustrialization, leaving limited opportunities and high deprivation. Unemployment has edged higher, and economic inactivity due to long-term sickness is accelerating. The region has seen increases in residents unable to work due to health conditions since the pandemic, threatening to become a permanent structural problem. Infrastructure remains mixed. While Manchester benefits from investment, other parts remain poorly connected. Former industrial towns feel isolated from economic opportunities. The inequality is stark. Manchester's gleaming towers contrast sharply with communities facing concentrated poverty just miles away. This prevents the region from fully utilizing its human capital and achieving sustainable growth. Scotland, with 5.5 million people, operates under devolved government with significant powers, exposing its fiscal challenges more clearly. The economy grew just 0.6% in 2023, below the UK average. Scotland ran a deficit of over 7% of gross domestic product from 2018 to 2019, well over twice the 3% EU mandate and far higher than England's 0.3% deficit. Each person in Scotland benefits from public spending worth £2,543 more than they pay in taxes, a massive fiscal transfer from the rest of the UK raising questions about sustainability. Gross domestic product per head sits at 98% of the UK average, but this is heavily influenced by volatile oil and gas revenues facing long-term decline as the world transitions from fossil fuels. This creates significant fiscal challenges ahead. The Scottish Government carries significant unfunded pension liabilities, and the 2026 fiscal outlook projects continued deficits unless growth accelerates or revenues increase dramatically. Limited tax powers constrain options for addressing the imbalance. Unemployment stands at 4.2%, but economic inactivity due to long-term sickness has been rising, particularly in former industrial areas with poor health outcomes. Infrastructure investment has been mixed. While renewable energy has seen projects, transport has seen chronic underinvestment. Brexit disrupted trade patterns, particularly for fishing and whiskey exports. The loss of EU structural funds, replaced with the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, has affected investment in disadvantaged areas. The Scottish Government claims it receives less funding than under EU programmes. With a large fiscal deficit, uncertain oil revenues, and sustainability questions, Scotland faces significant challenges. Addressing fiscal imbalances will require difficult decisions in coming years that no politician wants to make. Northern Ireland, with 1.9 million people, faces unique challenges shaped by history, geography, and political settlement. It recorded 2.1% gross domestic product growth in 2023. Yet this comes from an extremely low base. Gross domestic product per head is the lowest among United Kingdom nations at 82% of the average. Northern Ireland ran a deficit equal to 19% of gross domestic product in 2018 to 2019, the highest in the United Kingdom. Each person benefits from public spending worth £5,118 more than they pay, by far the largest per capita deficit. This heavy dependence on fiscal transfers makes the region highly vulnerable to any central government cuts. While unemployment was just 2% in the third quarter of 2024, the lowest rate in the United Kingdom, this masks high economic inactivity. Many working-age people are outside the labor force entirely due to long-term sickness, caring responsibilities, or discouragement. The Brexit Protocol created unique trading arrangements, adding regulatory burdens and costs that competitors elsewhere do not face. While businesses can access both United Kingdom and European Union markets, the complexity is strangling smaller enterprises. Median home prices around £185,000 reflect limited demand and modest wage growth. Even at these levels, housing remains unaffordable for many young people and low-income families. Rental yields of 6.06% are among the United Kingdom's highest, indicating landlords thrive while residents struggle. The public sector dominates even more than in Scotland or Wales. Public administration, health, and education account for disproportionate employment. While providing stability, this means high exposure to any government spending changes. Infrastructure has been chronically underfunded for decades. Belfast, with just 340,000 people, is too small to generate the agglomeration effects of larger cities. Political instability creates uncertainty for businesses, making long-term planning difficult. With the largest fiscal deficit in the United Kingdom and heavy public sector dependence, Northern Ireland's economic position is precarious. The region needs productivity improvements to reduce reliance on fiscal transfers, but securing necessary investment seems increasingly unlikely. Wales, with 3.1 million people, has long been the United Kingdom's poorest nation. Despite decades of European Union structural funds and United Kingdom government initiatives, Wales has failed to close the prosperity gap. Gross domestic product per head stands at just 73% of the United Kingdom average when excluding London, the lowest of any United Kingdom nation or region. This persistent productivity gap shows no signs of narrowing. Wales ran a deficit of 18% of GDP in 2018 to 2019. Each person benefits from public spending worth £4,412 more than they pay, a massive fiscal dependence on transfers. Gross disposable household income per head sits at 82% of the UK average, meaning Welsh households have significantly less to spend. Real incomes have stagnated for years, and the cost of living crisis hits particularly hard in a nation where many already struggled. Economic inactivity due to long-term sickness is higher than most of the UK. Since 2004, long-term illness has been the leading cause, worsening since COVID-19. Mental health issues, long COVID, and chronic conditions have reversed previous progress, removing potential workers from the labour market permanently. Wales lacks high-value employment. Public administration, health, and education dominate. Essential, but generating less economic value than finance, professional services, and R&D. Cardiff, with just 365,000 people, lacks the economic mass to compete with larger metropolitan centres. Brexit devastated Wales. The nation received £367 million annually in EU structural funds during 2014 to 2020. The UK Replacement Fund provides just £632 million over 3 years. The Welsh Government claims underfunding of £1.1 billion. Infrastructure is underdeveloped. Transport links are inadequate, particularly in rural areas. The cancellation of rail electrification projects crushed connectivity hopes. Manufacturing has declined dramatically, leaving economic scars in valley communities that have never healed. With the lowest GDP per head, a massive fiscal deficit, high economic inactivity, and limited high-value employment, Wales faces deep structural challenges. Without fundamental shifts, building Cardiff into a competitive metropolitan centre, developing high-value sectors, Wales risks remaining trapped in low productivity and fiscal dependence indefinitely. London's inclusion may surprise many. With the highest GDP per head at £56,000, 80% above the UK average, and globally competitive financial services, technology, and creative industries, London appears economically invincible. But beneath prosperity lie vulnerabilities, making the economy increasingly fragile. The median home price is £561,587, requiring annual income of £156,000 to afford under traditional lending criteria. Yet actual median household income is just £41,000. This extraordinary gap has profound implications. According to Greater London Authority data, 26% of Londoners reported difficulty paying rent or mortgage in early 2025, up from 21% in 2022. Rough sleeping reached 28.5 per 100,000 residents in November 2024, the highest since data collection began. Approximately 1.7% of London households live in temporary accommodation versus 0.2% in the rest of England. Commercial property is collapsing at unprecedented speed. Office vacancy hit 28.8%, reflecting permanent shifts to hybrid and remote work. Many prestigious buildings sit empty, and commercial foreclosures have surged. The LA Gas Company Tower, once valued at $632 million, faced foreclosure at just $200 million, a 68% loss. Transport and storage remains 20% below 2019 levels. Human health and social work, accommodation and food services, and arts and entertainment all remain below pre-pandemic benchmarks. Assumptions that London would bounce back quickly have proven catastrophically wrong. London recorded the lowest house price growth at 0.7%, a real terms decline with 3.6% inflation. For hundreds of thousands whose wealth is tied up in property, this represents devastating losses. Unemployment stood at 6.2%, higher than the national average. Job quality has declined, with 1 in 5 citing irregular hours. A third regularly perform unpaid overtime. Energy costs are 42% above the national average, and utility bills rose 11% in 2024. Combined with the highest council tax, congestion charges, and commuting costs on aging infrastructure, living in London consumes a disproportionate share of income, even for middle-class families. The exodus has accelerated. In 2024, 239,000 residents left London, the biggest domestic migration loss in the UK. People are being priced out of the city that offers the country's best jobs, creating a paradox where London's success drives away workers needed to sustain it. Tax revenues from tech have plunged 21% as profits collapsed. London's model is breaking down. The city is too expensive for teachers, nurses, police officers, and essential workers. The talent pipeline is choking off as young graduates calculate that moving to London no longer makes financial sense. The risk is a doom loop. High costs drive away residents and businesses, reducing revenues and dynamism, making the city less attractive and driving more departures. A city where median households cannot afford median homes is not economically healthy, no matter how impressive GDP figures appear. The South. The East, with 9.2 million people, has become a victim of its own success. Housing costs have spiraled to levels excluding most young people and essential workers, while failing to generate equivalent growth. Gross domestic product per head is 110% of the UK average, but this masks an affordability crisis rivaling London's. The median home price is £381,764, yet unlike London, the South East lacks equivalent job opportunities to justify such costs. House price growth was just 1.2% in 2025, barely ahead of London. With 3.6% inflation, this represents real terms decline. For homeowners who borrowed heavily against inflated values, this creates financial stress. For would-be buyers, homes remain comprehensively unaffordable. The economy is heavily dependent on London. Many commute to the capital for work, meaning prosperity is derivative rather than self-generated. As hybrid work reduced commuting, this relationship is being tested. Commercial property values have declined as businesses reconsider office space needs. Despite being one of the UK's wealthiest regions, councils face extraordinary strain. The Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead warned it was on the brink of effective bankruptcy in its 2025 to 2026 budget. Hampshire County Council has been named as being in serious financial difficulties. Despite affluence, councils face the same mathematics everywhere. Costs rising faster than revenues, central government grants slashed. Manufacturing has declined significantly without equivalent replacement. Much service sector work is low productivity retail and hospitality, sectors devastated by the cost of living crisis as consumers cut discretionary spending. Transportation infrastructure is strained. Roads are congested, rail services expensive and overcrowded. Investment has not kept pace with population growth. The region bears London's costs: congestion, high expenses, strained infrastructure, without equivalent benefits. The demographic profile is aging as young people are priced out and flee to affordable regions. This creates challenges for growth and public services. An aging population requires more healthcare and social care, while contributing less through taxation and economic activity. With housing costs excluding most working-age people, derivative prosperity dependent on London, and councils on bankruptcy's brink despite regional affluence, the South East's model is unsustainable. The region needs either major property value correction, devastating household wealth and creating political upheaval, or dramatic wage increases to justify current costs. Neither seems likely, suggesting continued strain and eventual collapse. The Southwest, with 5.7 million people, encompasses Britain's most beautiful coastline and historic cities. But beneath the postcard image lies an economy in deep trouble. GDP per head sits at 95% of the UK average, masking severe internal inequalities. Bristol pulls the average up, while Devon, Cornwall, and rural areas struggle with below-average incomes and limited opportunities. House price growth was just 1.4% in 2025, yet median prices remain around £320,000, far beyond local wages. Median household income is approximately £32,000, meaning average families would need to earn significantly more to afford median homes. Cornwall faces economic crisis. Median home prices exceed £300,000, while average wages are around £25,000. Second home buyers and holiday lets have hollowed out communities, driving out local families and young people. Some towns have higher property vacancy rates than permanent residential occupancy, a deeply dysfunctional market. The economy is heavily skewed toward tourism, retail, hospitality, and low-value services. While tourism generates revenue, it creates seasonal employment, low wages, and economic instability. Dependence on discretionary consumer spending makes it vulnerable to downturns. The cost of living crisis has devastated tourism. Consumer spending has contracted, visitor numbers are down as households cut discretionary expenses. Many tourism-dependent businesses have closed permanently. Rural areas relying on tourism have seen conditions deteriorate sharply. Agriculture faces its own collapse. Brexit disrupted labor supply, changed subsidy regimes, and created bureaucratic burdens. Many farms struggle to remain viable. The shift from EU subsidies to environmental land management has created uncertainty and reduced income. Infrastructure is woefully inadequate. Road and rail connectivity is poor, particularly for Cornwall and Devon. The Great Western Main Line is slow and expensive, hindering tourism and business. Rural areas have limited broadband, hampering knowledge-based industry development. Council finances are under severe pressure. While no South West Council has issued Section 114 notices yet, several have warned of significant challenges. The demographic profile, a high elderly proportion, creates acute social care pressure while generating lower council tax revenues. The region faces a doom loop. Housing unaffordability drives out young people. Aging demographics increase service costs while reducing dynamism, and dependence on low-wage sectors limits the tax base needed for public services. Many young people face a choice: leave for opportunities elsewhere, or stay and struggle with limited jobs and unaffordable housing. Healthcare services are strained. Cornwall hospitals face staffing shortages, partly because healthcare workers cannot afford local housing. This creates a vicious cycle. Service quality deteriorates, making it harder to attract professionals and further degrading services. The Southwest needs fundamental restructuring, diversification from tourism toward higher productivity sectors, massive infrastructure investment to overcome peripherality, and a housing market reset to restore affordability. None are easy or quick fixes. Without them, the region risks becoming a retirement community where working-age families can no longer afford to live. Birmingham stands as Britain's most dramatic economic failure. As Europe's largest local authority, its bankruptcy in September 2023 represents more than fiscal mismanagement. It is a case study in how decades of underinvestment, political dysfunction, and structural challenges combine to create catastrophic failure. The scale is unprecedented. Birmingham faced an estimated £760 million equal pay liability, later revised to potentially £250 million. An accounting discrepancy so large it prompted calls for public inquiry, plus an £87 million annual deficit. The response was devastating. 600 jobs eliminated, community centre closures, waste collection reduced to every 3 weeks, dimmed streetlights, a 21% council tax hike, £750 million in asset sales including parks and museums, and £1.25 billion capitalisation direction to breach normal accounting rules. The human cost is severe. Residents live with overflowing bins, darkened streets, and closed facilities. Over 100 doctors signed an open letter warning that a £51 million cut to children's services would put child safety at risk. Cultural organisations were entirely defunded. But Birmingham's crisis is not isolated. It is a symptom of broader collapse in English local government finance. Since 2010, local authority funding from central government has been cut 40% in real terms, while demand for services, particularly social care, has soared due to ageing populations and NHS responsibility transfers. Councils are legally required to provide services but lack revenue to do so. Since 2018, 8 councils have issued 12 Section 114 notices, effectively declaring an inability to meet legal obligations. Those councils include Northamptonshire twice, Croydon twice, Slough, Thurrock, Woking, Birmingham, and Nottingham. The Levelling Up Committee warned in February 2024 that the crisis was out of control and that without emergency funding, well-run councils could face going bust. It recommended £4 billion of emergency funding for the period from 2024 to 2025. The government largely ignored this advice. 1 in 10 English local authorities have reportedly considered issuing Section 114 notices. Windsor and Maidenhead, Hampshire, and Bradford have all been named as being in serious financial difficulties. The dominoes are lined up. The question is not if more will fall, but when and how many. Birmingham's economic challenges extend beyond council finances. The city struggled to replace lost manufacturing with equivalent high-value alternatives. Unemployment exceeds the national average, poverty is entrenched, and educational outcomes lag behind comparable cities. Infrastructure shows decades of underinvestment. Roads are congested, public transport is limited, and buildings and public spaces are in disrepair. The housing market reflects economic troubles. Office vacancies increased to 18.8%, and commercial property values have fallen dramatically. Nearly 1,976 bank-owned properties site idle, the highest in the UK. Birmingham's collapse raises questions about England's entire local government viability. If Birmingham, with its size and diversity, can fail so completely, what council is truly safe? The crisis exposes fundamental governance questions. Local authorities have limited revenue-raising power. They cannot introduce new taxes and face strict council tax increase limits, yet face open-ended service obligations. When costs exceed revenues, councils have no good options. cut services to dangerous levels, attempt risky commercial investments, as Thurrock and Woking did with disastrous results, or declare they cannot balance the books. The government's response, imposing commissioners, demanding cuts and asset sales, and providing limited support, offers no hope for dozens of other councils facing similar pressures. There is no plan to address the structural funding gap, no acknowledgement that the system is broken, and no reform proposals. Birmingham's bankruptcy represents a local government crisis reaching its logical conclusion. After years of funding cuts, increased responsibilities, and limits on raising revenue, the system failed. Birmingham was the first domino among Britain's second-tier cities to fall. But it will not be the last. The tragedy is that this was entirely predictable and preventable. Council finance mathematics have been clear for years. Costs rising faster than revenues, reserves depleting, and statutory obligations that cannot be legally avoided. Yet the political system failed to act until catastrophe struck. As Birmingham struggles to rebuild, the real question facing Britain is this: how many more cities will follow the same path before fundamental reform becomes unavoidable? The answer may come sooner than anyone expects.